When I was younger, I thought snow was magical. I used to press my little hands against the frosted windows, waiting for the first flakes of winter to fall. I dreamed of sledding, of snowmen, of cocoa by the fire.
But now?
Snow means something else to me. It means the night my father and stepmom threw me out into a blizzard with nothing but my coat and a half-frozen car to sit in. My name is Lena, I'm 23 years old, and this is the story of the night I almost froze to death because of the people who should have loved me the most. The trouble had been building for months. My dad remarried 3 years ago, after my mom passed from cancer. At first, I wanted to give his new wife, Melissa, a chance. She smiled a lot, baked cookies, asked me about school. But it didn't take long to see the cracks. Her sweetness was reserved for my dad, and for other people who could admire her perfect stepmom act. Behind closed doors, she was cold, controlling, and calculating. She never hit me. She didn't have to. Her words did the damage. You're too sensitive. Don't dress like that, you look cheap. You're a burden on your father. Every dig pushed me further down until I barely recognized myself in the mirror. Dad? He didn't see it, or maybe he chose not to. He was so relieved to have someone fill the void after Mom that he worshipped Melissa, like she hung the moon. Whenever I tried to talk to him, he'd shake his head. Don't start, Lena. She's trying her best. Give her time. Time didn't help. It only made things worse. By December, the fights had reached a fever pitch. I'd lost my job at the cafe when they cut hours, and while I searched for new work, I had to rely on them more than I wanted. Rent, food, even gas money became weapons Melissa used against me. You're 23, she sneered one night as I reheated leftovers. Do you plan to leech off us forever? I slammed the microwave shut. I didn't ask to lose my job. I'm applying everywhere I can. Dad looked up from his paper, sighing. Melissa's right, Lena. You need to pull your weight. My chest tightened. I want to, but until someone hires me. Melissa cut me off. Excuses. Always excuses. That night, I cried myself to sleep in the small bedroom that used to be my sanctuary. Christmas was the breaking point. I came downstairs in the sweater my mom had given me on her last Christmas alive. Melissa wrinkled her nose. You're wearing that? It was from Mom, I whispered. Her lips curved in a cruel smile. Exactly. I ignored her, tried to focus on the tree, the gifts, the flicker of lights. But halfway through dinner, Melissa launched into me again. She's lazy, Robert, she snapped, stabbing her fork into her potatoes. She doesn't contribute, she doesn't listen, and she's dragging this house down. Dad's jaw tightened. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me. And then Melissa delivered the blow. She either leaves tonight or I do. The room went silent. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Dad finally lifted his gaze to me, cold and hard. Get your things, Lena. You're out. The words sliced deeper than any winter wind. I thought he was bluffing. I thought he'd never choose her over me. But an hour later, I was standing outside in the snow with a duffel bag, my breath turning to ice in the air. Dad, please, I begged. My tears burned against my cheeks as the blizzard raged around us. He didn't meet my eyes. Figure it out. Melissa stood behind him, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. And then the door slammed. I dragged my bag to my old sedan, snow soaking through my boots, fingers numb as I fumbled with the keys. The engine coughed to life, heater sputtering weakly. I curled into the seat, hugging my coat around me, but the cold sank into my bones. Minutes stretched into hours. The storm howled, snow burying the car inch by inch. My phone battery dropped fast, the signal cutting in and out. I texted Kayla, no reply. Everyone was with their families. No one expected me to be out here. Shivers racked my body, my teeth chattering so hard my jaw ached. My fingers turned stiff, my vision blurred. I thought about Mom, her laugh, her hugs, the way she'd fought to the very end. Mom, I whispered into the darkness, I don't want to die. But the cold was relentless, pressing in from every side. I don't remember closing my eyes. I only remember the sound that pulled me back, a voice, rough and urgent. Lena. Dear God, Lena. The door yanked open, icy wind slashing across my skin. Strong arms lifted me from the seat, a coat wrapping around me like a shield. Through the haze, I saw him. Lined face, gray beard, eyes wide with terror. My grandpa. He pressed my frozen hands to his chest, his voice shaking. I've got you, sweetheart. You're safe now. And then everything went black. I don't remember much about being pulled out of the car. My body was too far gone, numb from hours of cold, but fragments stick in my mind like jagged pieces of glass. The crunch of snow under boots. The slam of a car door. The smell of leather and wool as someone wrapped me tighter in a blanket. And always his voice. My grandpa's voice, trembling with fear, but never letting go. Stay with me, Lena. Don't you dare close those eyes again. I've got you now. I wanted to answer, to tell him I'd try, but my lips wouldn't move. My jaw had locked from the cold. Every breath rasped like broken glass in my lungs. The blizzard roared outside as we sped through the night. I felt the vibration of the engine through my bones, the faint warmth of the heater seeping into me. Too slow, too faint. Grandpa kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping my frozen fingers. Almost there, sweetheart, he whispered over and over. Almost home. When I woke, the world was brighter.
Softer.
Warmth pressed against me, thick quilts piled high, the steady hum of a space heater. My body still trembled with chills, but it wasn't the sharp, biting cold anymore. I blinked, taking in the room. Familiar wooden beams, shelves lined with books, the faint smell of cedar. My grandpa's cabin. A figure sat slumped in a chair nearby, head bent, chin resting on his chest. His big, work-roughened hands were folded, still clutching a mug gone cold. Grandpa, I croaked. My voice came out as a cracked whisper. His head jerked up. Relief flooded his weathered face as he leaned forward, his eyes glistening. Oh, thank God. Lena. He was beside me in seconds, adjusting the blankets, brushing damp hair from my forehead. You're safe now. You gave me the scare of my life, you know that? I tried to smile, but it came out weak, trembling. Didn't mean to. Not your fault, he said quickly, his voice thick. None of this is your fault. The words cracked something inside me. My throat burned as tears welled. They threw me out, Grandpa. In the storm. Said I wasn't welcome anymore. His jaw tightened, his weathered hands curling into fists. I saw the anger flash in his eyes, the kind of protective fury only a grandparent can have. They'll answer for that, he growled. But right now, all that matters is you're alive. The first hours were a blur of blankets, hot tea, and Grandpa hovering with quiet care. He checked my temperature, rubbed my hands to get circulation going, made me sip broth slowly even when I felt too weak to hold the spoon. Why were you even out looking for me? I asked, voice hoarse. He hesitated, then sighed. I had a feeling.
Call it instinct.
I knew something wasn't right after Christmas. So I drove by your dad's house. Saw your car half buried in snow down the street. My heart about stopped. The thought of him finding me like that, slumped in the driver's seat, lips blue, skin like ice, sent a shiver down my spine. If you hadn't— Don't finish that sentence, he said firmly, his rough hand covering mine. You're here. That's what matters. Over the next day, strength crept back into me in small pieces. My fingers tingled painfully as the blood returned. My legs ached when I stood, but the warmth of Grandpa's cabin cocooned me in safety. He didn't press for details, not at first. He let me rest, feeding me, fussing over me, telling me stories from his younger years to distract me. But by the evening, I knew the questions were coming. We sat at the kitchen table, the old wood scarred with decades of family meals. He poured steaming cocoa into mismatched mugs and slid one toward me. Lena, he said quietly, tell me what happened. I stared into the cocoa, my reflection trembling in the dark surface. My throat tightened. It was Christmas dinner. Melissa gave Dad an ultimatum. Either I go, or she does. Grandpa's face darkened. And your father? He chose her. The words cracked as they left me. He told me to pack my things. Threw me out in the middle of the storm. Didn't even look at me when I begged him to let me stay. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire in the stove. When Grandpa finally spoke, his voice was low but filled with steel. Your father forgot what it means to be a parent. He'll regret it. Tears slipped down my cheeks. Why doesn't he love me, Grandpa? Why am I never enough? Grandpa's chair scraped back as he moved closer, pulling me into a hug. His arms were strong, steady, wrapping around me the way my father never did. You are enough, he whispered fiercely. You always have been. Don't you let their cruelty make you doubt that. I buried my face in his flannel shirt, sobbing quietly, letting his warmth shield me from the storm inside my chest. That night, I lay awake listening to the wind howl outside, safe under piles of quilts. But inside, I felt another storm brewing, anger, hurt, betrayal so deep it threatened to swallow me whole. Dad hadn't just failed me. He had left me to die. And while part of me wanted to curl into Grandpa's safety forever, another part whispered that this couldn't be the end of the story. They had to face what they did. And when they did, it wouldn't be behind closed doors. It would be where the whole world could see. The next morning, when I woke, the blizzard had passed. Light filtered through Grandpa's cabin windows, turning the snow outside into a glittering ocean of white. It was beautiful, but I couldn't look at it without remembering the icy terror of the night before, my breath slowing, my body stiffening, the way I thought I might never open my eyes again. Grandpa was already up, bustling around in the kitchen. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. He greeted me with a warm smile, but I could see the worry etched in the lines of his face. How are you feeling, sweetheart? He asked, setting a plate in front of me. Better, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the steaming mug he pushed toward me. Still sore. My fingers hurt, but alive. Alive is what counts, he said. His eyes softened, then hardened just as quickly. But it doesn't erase what they did. I froze with my fork halfway to my mouth. Grandpa. No, he cut me off gently, but firmly. Your father and Melissa threw you out to die, Lena. That's not something we sweep under the rug. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. The word hit me like a slap.
Crime.
He wasn't wrong, but hearing it spoken aloud made the reality sharp and brutal. I set the fork down, appetite gone. What do we even do? He's my dad. People won't believe me. Grandpa leaned forward, his weathered hands folding on the table. People will believe what they see. And we're going to make sure they see the truth. For most of that day, Grandpa and I gathered proof. He took me back to where he found my car, the snow already piled high around the spot. The image made me shiver, but he took photos anyway. Evidence, he explained. Time, date, conditions. We went back to his cabin, where he made me write everything down. Every word Melissa said, every detail of Dad's choice, every minute I spent in that frozen car. You're building your testimony, he said firmly. Don't leave anything out. It felt strange, like I was preparing for trial instead of recounting the worst night of my life. But writing it out made the memories pour faster than I could catch them. The betrayal. The look in Dad's eyes when he told me to leave. The sound of the door slamming behind me. At one point, my pen slipped from my shaking hand, tears blurring the page. Why would he do this, Grandpa? Why was I worth so little to him? Grandpa's hand landed gently on my shoulder. It wasn't about your worth, Lena. It was about his weakness. He let that woman poison him, and instead of protecting you, he chose the easier path. That's on him, not you. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to stop carrying the weight of wondering what I'd done wrong. But the hurt sat in my chest like ice that refused to melt. That evening, Grandpa made a call. I sat nearby, wrapped in a quilt, listening to the one-sided conversation. Yes, Sheriff, it's about my granddaughter. Yes, it's urgent. I found her in her car during the blizzard, half frozen. Her father threw her out. Yes, you heard me right. No, I'm not exaggerating. She could have died. We'll be down at the station tomorrow. When he hung up, my stomach twisted. The sheriff? Grandpa, what if this blows up? What if it makes everything worse? Grandpa's eyes met mine, steady as stone. Worse than you freezing to death alone? No, Lena. The time for silence is over. His conviction was unshakable. For the first time, I wondered if my survival was more than luck. Maybe it was a chance to finally break free of their cruelty. That night, sleep didn't come easily. Every time I drifted off, I saw the car again, snow swallowing the windows, my father's cold face as he closed the door. I woke with a gasp, sweat dampening my hair. Grandpa was there in seconds, settling on the edge of the bed. Bad dream? I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. He reached for my hand, his rough palm warm and steady. You don't have to fight this alone, sweetheart.
You've got me.
You've always got me. Tears burned my eyes. Why couldn't Dad be like you? Grandpa's expression darkened. Because he forgot what love means. But I haven't. And I won't let him get away with this. The next day, we went to the sheriff's office. My heart pounded as I stepped inside, clutching the binder of notes and photos Grandpa had insisted I bring. Sheriff Collins, a broad man with kind eyes, looked at me with shock when Grandpa explained what happened. Thrown out? In that storm? I nodded, my voice shaking. They told me to leave. Melissa said either I go or she does. And my dad, he chose her. He made me pack my things and shoved me outside in the middle of the blizzard. If Grandpa hadn't found me, my throat closed. I wouldn't be here. The sheriff's jaw tightened. He glanced at Grandpa, then back at me. That's neglect at best, attempted homicide at worst. We'll open an investigation. The words made my knees weak. I sank into the chair, my chest heaving. Grandpa's hand on my shoulder steadied me. Thank you, Grandpa said firmly. She deserves justice. As we left the station, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it and my breath caught. You think you can run to him? To that old man? You're pathetic, Lena. Don't come crawling back here when the world laughs at you. Melissa. Grandpa saw my face pale and asked what it was. I showed him the text. His eyes narrowed. That woman's made a mistake, he growled. She thinks she can keep hurting you. But this time, she's not dealing with a scared little girl. She's dealing with both of us. That night, sitting by the fire, Grandpa outlined the plan. The sheriff's starting his investigation. But we'll do our own too. We'll gather witnesses, family, anyone who's seen how they treat you. The more truth we have, the less they can hide. I stared into the flames, my chest aching but filled with a strange new fire. For years, I'd tried to be quiet, to avoid rocking the boat, to hope Dad would finally notice me. But silence had nearly killed me. Now I wanted noise. I wanted the truth out in the open, no matter how ugly it was. And with Grandpa by my side, I finally believed I could do it. But even as we planned, fear lingered. They had power, Dad's charm, Melissa's manipulation. People believed them. People trusted them. Would they believe me? Would anyone care that a 23-year-old girl had been tossed into a snowstorm like garbage? Grandpa must have read my mind. He squeezed my hand, his voice steady. You're stronger than you know, Lena. They tried to bury you in the snow. But you survived. And now it's their turn to face the storm. His words lodged deep inside me. I clung to them like lifelines. Because I knew, deep down, the storm was only just beginning. The sheriff's investigation started faster than I expected. Within days, deputies were calling neighbors, asking when they last saw me at my dad's house. They questioned staff at the diner where I'd worked about how often I complained about home life. They even asked the ER nurse who checked my frostbitten fingers what condition I'd been in when Grandpa carried me inside. Melissa must have caught wind of it immediately. Her texts grew nastier by the day. You're ruining this family. No one will believe you. Ungrateful brat. You'll regret this. I didn't reply. Grandpa told me not to. Let her dig her own grave, he said, sliding my phone back onto the table. The sheriff will see those for what they are, evidence of harassment.
But I won't lie.
Her words still crawled under my skin. For so long, she'd trained me to doubt myself.
To shrink.
to believe that maybe I was the problem. Grandpa never let that thought fester for long. Whenever I started to spiral, he'd put a steady hand on my shoulder and say, "Don't forget, Lena, you survived what they wanted to kill you with. That makes you stronger than either of them combined." I clung to that. As the days passed, my body slowly healed. My fingers ached constantly, pins and needles stabbing me as circulation improved. My chest still rattled from the cold, a reminder of the hours I spent in that car. But strength crept back in, helped by Grandpa's endless soups, teas, and steady encouragement. One night, I caught him studying me quietly as I ate. "What?" I asked, self-conscious. He smiled, shaking his head. "You look more like your mother every day." The words hit me like a warm wave. My mom, who had always been my safe place before cancer took her. The thought that he saw her in me, her strength, maybe even her resilience, made my chest swell. Melissa had spent years trying to erase Mom from the house, from Dad's memories, even from my life. But sitting here, in Grandpa's cabin, I felt her spirit more alive than ever. And I vowed Melissa would never erase me either. The investigation reached its peak when the sheriff called to say he'd be interviewing Dad and Melissa. "They'll deny everything," I muttered bitterly when Grandpa relayed the message. "Of course they will," Grandpa agreed. "But lies crack under pressure. Truth doesn't." He was right. 2 days later, Grandpa and I went into town to pick up supplies. On the way back, we stopped at the diner for pie. As soon as I walked in, heads turned. Conversations hushed. Then, one by one, people nodded at me, some even offering quiet smiles. "Looks like word's out," Grandpa murmured, settling into the booth. The waitress, an older woman who'd known my mom, leaned close as she poured our coffee. "Don't you let them scare you, Lena. Folks know what they did. You're brave for speaking up." Tears pricked my eyes.
Brave.
No one had ever called me that before. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a survivor. The next week, the sheriff called us back in. "I spoke with your father and stepmother," he said, his voice measured. "As expected, they deny forcing you out. Claim you left on your own during an argument." I scoffed. "That's a lie." He nodded. "Yes, but we've gathered enough from neighbors and relatives to confirm a pattern of neglect. With the storm that night, your exposure could have been fatal. At minimum, this is child abandonment. Even though you're legally an adult, the situation shows intent to cause harm." My stomach dropped. "So, what happens now?" "We'll be forwarding our findings to the prosecutor's office. Whether charges are filed will depend on them. But I can assure you, this won't be swept under the rug." Grandpa gripped my hand under the table, squeezing gently. "You hear that, Lena? They can't hide anymore." For the first time in years, I felt like justice might be possible. That night, Dad showed up at Grandpa's cabin. The knock rattled the door like thunder. When Grandpa opened it, Dad stood there, his face twisted in anger. "Where is she?" he demanded. Grandpa didn't move. "She's safe. And that's all you need to know." Dad's eyes flicked past him, locking onto me in the living room. His voice rose.
Lena.
"What the hell are you doing? Running to the sheriff? Making up stories? You're trying to ruin me." I stood slowly, my hands shaking but my spine straight. "I didn't make up anything. You threw me out, Dad. In a blizzard. If Grandpa hadn't found me, I'd be dead." His face flushed red. "You're exaggerating. You always do. Melissa never wanted this to go so far. You're the one making a spectacle." At the mention of her name, rage boiled in my chest. "Melissa wanted me gone from the start.
And you chose her over me.
You didn't just throw me out, you left me to die." The words echoed through the cabin, thick and heavy. For once, Dad didn't have a response. His mouth opened, then shut again. His eyes darted, searching for an excuse. Grandpa stepped forward, his presence towering. "You need to leave, Robert. You've done enough damage." Dad bristled. "This is my daughter." "No." Grandpa cut in sharply. "She's my granddaughter. And she's under my roof now. You don't get to call the shots anymore." For a moment, silence hung between them, thick with decades of unspoken tension. Then Dad turned, muttering curses as he stomped back into the storm. When the door slammed, my knees buckled. Grandpa was there instantly, catching me. "You did good, sweetheart." You stood up to him. I buried my face against his chest, sobbing. Why doesn't he love me? His arms tightened around me. Because he doesn't know how. But that's his failure, not yours. Days passed. The investigation loomed, the possibility of charges hanging in the air. Melissa's text stopped suddenly, and I realized with a chill that silence could be more dangerous than words. But I wasn't alone anymore. Grandpa stood beside me at every turn, reminding me of my worth, my strength, my right to be heard. And slowly, I realized something. This wasn't just about punishment. It was about reclaiming myself from the lies Melissa told, from the silence Dad demanded, from the fear that had kept me small for too long. They had tried to bury me in the snow, but I had survived. And now, it was their turn to face the storm. The sheriff's investigation was like a stone tossed into a pond, ripples spreading further every day. What had been whispered at diner counters or behind church pews was now front and center. Everyone knew what my dad and Melissa had done, and for the first time in my life, people weren't looking at me with doubt. They were looking at me with sympathy, even outrage. At first, I didn't know how to handle it. Strangers approached me at the grocery store to pat my shoulder. Old family friends left casseroles at Grandpa's porch murmuring, "Stay strong, honey." The pity in their eyes stung, but the validation felt like a balm. For once, the truth wasn't hidden, it was out in the open. But with that exposure came backlash. And it hit my dad and Melissa hard. One Sunday morning, Grandpa and I went to church. I hadn't stepped foot inside since Mom's funeral. The air smelled of pine polish and old hymnals, the pews packed with neighbors in thick winter coats. When we walked in, heads turned. I stiffened, expecting judgment. Instead, I saw nods, even smiles. A few people leaned close as we passed, whispering, "Glad you're safe, Lena." But the real shift came when Dad and Melissa entered. The room chilled. Conversations dropped. Instead of smiles, people turned away. The choir director avoided their eyes. A deacon actually shifted seats to put distance between them. Melissa's face tightened as she clutched Dad's arm, her perfect smile faltering. Dad's jaw was set, but his eyes flicked nervously at the cold reception. When the service ended, no one lingered to chat with them. Instead, people gathered around me and Grandpa. "You're welcome here, Lena," Mrs. Harris, an old friend of Mom's, said warmly. "Don't you ever forget that." Melissa's glare burned holes in my back as Grandpa guided me out the doors. "That," he whispered with quiet satisfaction, "is the power of truth." The social walls around them closed in tighter as days passed. Dad's longtime friends stopped inviting him to poker night. Melissa's book club disbanded mysteriously, though I heard whispers it had reformed, just without her. At the diner, I overheard two men at the counter talking. "Can you believe Robert left his girl out in that storm?" Shameful. Man supposed to protect his child, not toss her away. For years, Melissa had carefully crafted their image as the perfect couple, generous, respectable, family-oriented. Now it was unraveling thread by thread. And I can't deny it, a small, fierce part of me savored it. But even with the community turning, Dad didn't stop trying to twist the story. One evening, I got a voicemail from him. "Lena, you got to stop this nonsense. You're embarrassing me." Melissa's distraught, the sheriff's hounding us, and all because you blew an argument out of proportion.
"Come home."
"We'll talk this through. Family business should stay private."
Private.
That word made me sick. Private had always meant silence, meant me swallowing pain so they could keep their perfect image. I deleted the message without replying. Grandpa noticed my clenched jaw and asked, "What did he say?" I shook my head. "Same old. Wants me to shut up." Grandpa's lips thinned. "That's what abusers count on, silence. You're breaking that chain." Breaking it became easier when the local paper ran a story. The headline was blunt. "Sheriff investigates couple after stepdaughter found freezing in blizzard." My heart pounded as I read my own words quoted inside. The notes Grandpa had helped me write, the photos he'd taken of the snow-buried car. The article didn't sensationalize. It just told the truth. But truth can be louder than any lie. Melissa's fury was immediate. She sent another text dripping with venom. "Enjoy your 15 minutes, Lena. When this blows over, you'll be the one people laugh at." I stared at the screen, then handed it to Grandpa. He chuckled grimly. Let her dig deeper. Every text is another nail in her coffin. Despite the storm of attention, Grandpa made sure I stayed grounded. He took me ice fishing on the frozen lake near his cabin, bundled in layers, the air sharp and clear. We sat in silence sometimes, other times talking about Mom, about the summers the first used to spend here as a kid. "You are always happiest here," he said one afternoon, lowering his line into the icy water. "Because it felt safe," I admitted. "Home never did. Not after Mom died." His eyes softened. "Then let this be home, sweetheart. At least until you're ready to make your own." The idea lodged in my heart, warm and solid. Home. Not the house where Melissa sneered and Dad looked away. Here, with Grandpa, with truth, with love. But the calm couldn't last forever. The sheriff called again, this time with news. The prosecutor was reviewing the case. If charges were filed, Dad and Melissa could face criminal neglect or worse. I sat in stunned silence after hanging up, my hands trembling. Criminal charges? Grandpa, that's huge. He nodded. And it's what they deserve. But a tiny part of me faltered. As much as I wanted them held accountable, a sliver of guilt crept in. They were still my family. My father. Grandpa must have seen the hesitation in my eyes. He leaned forward, his voice firm but kind. "Don't confuse blood with loyalty, Lena. He gave up the right to call himself your father when he left you to die. Justice isn't cruelty. It's the truth catching up." His words anchored me. The guilt faded, replaced with clarity. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. About never letting them do this to me or anyone else again. The backlash reached its peak at another family gathering, my cousin Emily's birthday. Grandpa and I went, not sure what reception we'd get. When we arrived, conversations hushed again. Dad and Melissa were already there, standing stiff near the cake table. Melissa's smile looked painted on, brittle. As we mingled, I caught snippets. "Poor girl," nearly froze. "Melissa's poison. Always has been." "Robert's lost his way." When Melissa tried to approach, people shifted aside. She ended up standing alone, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Dad hovered near her, his eyes darting toward me, but he didn't dare come close. Later, as Grandpa drove us home, I sat in silence, staring out at the snowy fields. "They're crumbling," I whispered. Grandpa's hand tightened on the wheel. "Good. They should. But don't lose yourself in their fall, Lena. Focus on your rise." His words struck deep. For the first time, I realized this wasn't just about tearing them down. It was about building myself back up. That night, I stood in front of the mirror at Grandpa's cabin. My reflection stared back, chestnut hair loose over my shoulders, hazel eyes still ringed with shadows from sleepless nights, freckles faint but there. I saw the girl who had begged her father for love and been thrown out into the snow. But I also saw someone new, someone who had survived, who had spoken, who had made the world listen. Melissa's words had always echoed in my mind. "You're a burden. You're worthless." But now, my reflection whispered something different. "You're strong. You're enough. You're free." And with Grandpa standing by me, I knew the fight wasn't over. The storm wasn't done. But this time, I wasn't afraid of it. The call from the prosecutor's office came on a Wednesday morning. The winter sun was weak through Grandpa's kitchen window, glinting off the endless white fields, when the phone rang. Grandpa picked it up, his voice gruff but steady as he answered. "Yes, this is Harold Parker. Yes, she's here with me." He glanced at me, then motioned for me to sit down. His face tightened as he listened. Finally, he said, "Thank you, sir. We'll be ready." When he hung up, my stomach was in knots. "Well, they're moving forward," he said simply. "Formal charges. Neglect. Endangerment. Both of them. The mug slipped in my hands and clattered onto the table. Charges? Against Dad, too. Yes, Grandpa said firmly. He didn't just stand by. He enforced it. He threw you out himself. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Part of me had been waiting for this, hoping justice would come. But another part, the daughter part, ached. My dad wasn't just losing his reputation now. He could lose his freedom. I don't know if I can go through with this, I whispered. Grandpa reached across the table, his weathered hand closing over mine. His grip was steady, grounding. Lena, you almost died. If I hadn't found you, you'd be buried under that snow. Do you understand? This isn't about vengeance. It's about truth. About making sure they never do this again. His words pierced through my guilt like a blade through ice. He was right. I wasn't the one destroying my dad's life. He had done that himself. The news spread quickly. By evening, it was everywhere, on Facebook, whispered in town, printed in the local paper's front page. Local man and wife face neglect charges after daughter found in blizzard. Dad and Melissa couldn't hide anymore. The text started again, frantic this time. Lena, think about what you're doing. You'll regret this when I'm in prison. Please, stop before it's too late. Melissa's were sharper like knives. Rotten little traitor. You're ruining your father's life just because you couldn't handle rules. I stared at the messages, my chest tightening, but this time I didn't crumble. I saved them, every word, every timestamp. More evidence. When I showed Grandpa, his lips curved into a grim smile. They don't even realize they're handing you the rope to hang them with. The backlash in town reached its peak. At the grocery store, I overheard two women whispering near the produce aisle. She nearly froze to death, poor thing. And Robert? Always thought he was weak since he married that Melissa. When they noticed me, they stopped whispering. One of them placed a hand on my arm. You're strong, Lena. Don't back down. Their words filled me with warmth. For years, Melissa had made me believe everyone would laugh at me if I spoke out. But no one was laughing. They were standing beside me. Melissa, on the other hand, wasn't standing at all. She stopped showing her face in public. No book club, no charity events. Dad still tried to go about his days, but people avoided him. Once, I saw him in town as Grandpa, and I walked past. His eyes met mine, full of something I couldn't read. Anger, yes, but also shame. For the first time, he was the one shrinking away. The court date was set. I dreaded it and longed for it all at once. In the weeks leading up, Grandpa prepared me. We sat at the kitchen table night after night, going through every detail of my statement, practicing answers to possible questions. Stick to the truth, he said again and again. Don't let their lawyer twist you. You lived it. Own it. Some nights I cried. The memory's too sharp, too raw. But Grandpa never let me give up. You survived the storm, Lena, he'd remind me. This is just another storm. And you'll survive this one too. The night before court, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling in Grandpa's guest room, listening to the faint creak of the cabin settling in the cold. My mind replayed it all. The dinner, Melissa's ultimatum, Dad's cold eyes as he told me to pack my things, the blizzard swallowing me whole. Tears slipped down my cheeks. For a moment, I wished I could erase it all, pretend it never happened. But then I remembered the warmth of Grandpa's arms when he pulled me from the car, the fire in his voice when he said I deserved justice. That memory gave me strength. The courthouse smelled of old wood and disinfectant. My heart hammered as Grandpa and I walked through the doors, our breath puffing white in the frigid air. Dad and Melissa were already there, seated at the defense table. Melissa wore her usual pristine suit, but her face was pale, lips tight. Dad looked older somehow, his shoulders hunched, his eyes shadowed. When our eyes met, my stomach twisted. This was the man who had once carried me on his shoulders, who taught me how to ride a bike. But it was also the man who had slammed the door on me in the middle of a storm. Both truths lived in him, and the clash of them nearly broke me. Grandpa's hand on my back steadied me. Focus, sweetheart. Don't look at him. Look ahead. So I did. The proceedings were a blur at first. opening statements, legal terms I barely understood. Then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, my knees shaking. The bailiff swore me in. My voice trembled at first, but as I began telling my story, something inside me shifted. I spoke of Melissa's cruelty, of her ultimatum, of Dad's silence, of the door slamming, the snow piling up, my breath slowing. I spoke of the fear, the despair, the way I thought I'd never see another sunrise. And then I spoke of Grandpa, of how he found me, how he saved me, how he reminded me I was worth saving. By the time I finished, my voice was strong, steady. The courtroom was silent. When Melissa's lawyer cross-examined me, trying to twist my words, I held my ground. No, I said firmly again and again. That's not what happened. This is the truth. Every time doubt threatened, I looked at Grandpa. His steady gaze reminded me I wasn't alone. When I stepped down, my legs shook, but my heart was lighter. I had spoken. I had survived the storm in more ways than one. Dad took the stand next. His voice cracked as he insisted he never meant harm, that it was just a mistake. Melissa sat stiff beside him, her eyes darting, her lips pressed tight. But the more they spoke, the hollower their words sounded. The prosecutor played recordings of Melissa's texts, showed photos of my car buried in snow. The truth was undeniable. And for the first time, I saw fear in Melissa's eyes. Real fear. That night, back at the cabin, I sat by the fire with Grandpa. My body was exhausted, but my heart burned with something new.
Hope.
Whatever happens, Grandpa said softly, you did what you needed to. You spoke. You stood. I couldn't be prouder. Tears slid down my cheeks.
Thank you, Grandpa.
For saving me. For believing me. He squeezed my hand. Always, sweetheart. Always. As the fire crackled, I realized the storm wasn't over yet. But I wasn't afraid anymore. Because this time, I wasn't facing it alone. The courtroom was silent as the judge read the verdict. My heart pounded in my ears. Every word stretched into eternity. On the charges of criminal neglect and endangerment, this court finds the defendants, Robert Parker and Melissa Parker, guilty. The words slammed into me like thunder. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My father's name, guilty. Beside me, Grandpa let out a long exhale, his rough hand closing tightly around mine. Melissa's face drained of color, her hands clutching her pearls like they might keep her from sinking. Dad's had dropped, shoulders hunched, as if the weight of his choices had finally broken him. The judge continued, outlining fines, probation, mandatory counseling, community service. Melissa was sentenced harsher for instigating, but Dad wasn't spared. Their perfect image gone. When the gavel struck, I realized my whole life had shifted. Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed, reporters shouting questions. I froze, the noise overwhelming, until Grandpa's steady presence grounded me. No comment, he barked, shielding me with his broad shoulders as he guided me through the swarm. We made it to his truck, the doors slamming shut on the chaos. Inside, it was quiet again, just the hum of the engine and the weight of what had happened. I don't even know how to feel, I admitted, staring at my trembling hands.
Part of me wanted this.
Part of me still wishes Dad would have chosen differently. Grandpa's eyes softened as he glanced at me. It's natural to want your father's love, Lena. But love without protection isn't love at all. What he gave you was betrayal. Today, the truth caught up to him. Tears blurred my vision. Then why does it still hurt? Because you're human, he said gently. But pain doesn't erase strength. And you proved yours. In the days that followed, life took on a new rhythm. Dad and Melissa's house became quieter than ever. Neighbors stopped visiting. Melissa avoided grocery stores altogether, ordering deliveries instead. Dad went to work with his head down, no longer the confident man who once strutted around with Melissa on his arm. I heard whispers that Melissa's family had distanced themselves, embarrassed by the scandal. Dad's old friends didn't answer his calls anymore. They weren't just facing legal punishment, they were living in social exile. And me? For the first time in years, I could breathe without guilt. People in town no longer looked at me with suspicion or pity. They looked at me with respect. The girl who had been thrown away wasn't invisible anymore. One afternoon, I sat on Grandpa's porch, watching the snow melt under the first hints of spring. He came out with 2 mugs of cocoa and handed one to me. "You're quiet today," he said, settling beside me. "I keep thinking about that night," I admitted softly. "About how close I came to not being here at all. It scares me." Grandpa's gaze was steady, his voice firm. "But you are here. You fought. And you've built something new out of the ashes. Don't let fear steal that from you." I sipped the cocoa, warmth spreading through me. "I want to make something of this, Grandpa. Not just survive it. I want to use it." He nodded slowly, a proud smile tugging at his lips. "Then do it. Tell your story. Help others who've been silenced." The idea lodged in my heart, fierce and unshakable. That spring, I applied for community college. The tuition felt daunting, but Grandpa insisted he'd help. "Consider it an investment in your future," he said, brushing off my protests. When I walked into my first class, textbooks tucked under my arm, I thought of Mom, of how she used to tell me I was capable of anything. I thought of Grandpa, who pulled me from the snow when no one else cared. And I thought of myself, the girl who refused to stay quiet. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was beginning again. The last time I saw Dad was months later, in town. He was walking alone, shoulders slumped, his once confident stride gone. For a moment, my chest tightened. I wanted him to look at me, to finally acknowledge me. But when his eyes met mine, they flickered with shame, and then he looked away. I realized then that I'd never get the apology I longed for. And maybe I didn't need it anymore. Because his silence wasn't my prison anymore. It was his. On the anniversary of that blizzard, Grandpa and I sat by the fire. The storm outside was gentler this year, flakes drifting lazily instead of howling with rage. "You know," Grandpa said, sipping his cocoa, "storms don't just destroy. They clear paths too. They show you what's strong enough to survive." I leaned against his shoulder, letting his warmth steady me. Then maybe that storm was my beginning, not my end. He kissed the top of my head. "That's my girl." And as the fire crackled and the snow fell softly outside, I finally believed it. They had tried to bury me in the storm. But I didn't just survive. I rose.